Let's welcome to the show for the first time here on Soccer North, Oliver Platt, analyst with OneSoccer. The Canadian men, they're out of the Gold Cup, Ollie. They go on the quarterfinal stage, but not without a fight against the Americans. And even though there were a lot of veterans on this Canadian squad, we did see a lot of new faces, a lot of players getting their first cap for Canada. Did one in particular, I'm just going to make you choose one, stand out to you as a possible starter for the 2026 World Cup?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go with the answer that I think probably a lot of people are giving coming out of that tournament, which is Ali Ahmed. He stood out, particularly, I think, in the group stage, where you understand that the quality of opponent is a bit lower than you're going to face in a knockout stage or at a World Cup, certainly. But I think one thing I look for always with young players coming into this team is just how they kind of build relationships with the more established players around them on the pitch. Can they play at the same tempo? Can they kind of think the game in the same kind of way as the top players who have more experience and have played at those higher levels? Because the tempo of the game does go up in international football when you're playing against better opponents. And I thought Ahmed showed his ability to do that, particularly in combination with Richie Laryea down that right-hand side, who was one of the more senior players on that team. He showed he was on the same wavelength as Laryea and could connect and combine in really promising ways down that flank. So certainly looking ahead to 2026 when he's going to be right in the prime of his career, but even I think over the next few months going into the windows we're hoping for later this year, I think Ali Ahmed is someone John Herdman will go back to pretty quickly.
We can't help but look at one position in particular as well, and that's the goalkeeping position. We know Milan Borjan played in the first two games. Due to injury, he leaves the tournament. Dane Sinclair steps up. What did he show you about his ability to compete for that number one position? Do you think it's now going to boil down to him and Max Crépeau fighting for that starting spot?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really difficult one for John Herdman to manage, because I don't think Milan Borjan has any intention of relinquishing his spot, right? I think he still sees himself, continuing as Canada's number one goalkeeper, potentially even being able to go to the 2026 World Cup, even though a lot of people would say that, obviously that might come too late in his career. So it's going to be a tricky one for the coach to manage, in the sense that Borjan has been a big leader of this team. He's very much an emotional leader. He's got a strong connection with Herdman himself. I think both of them, think the world of each other. But at the same time, Herdman has to take that dispassionate and objective view of who is going to be my starting goalkeeper in the long term here. And particularly, like you said, everything revolves around that 2026 World Cup. I thought Sinclair did a lot for his case in this tournament, not just in terms of his play, only in two games, obviously, but also his off-field demeanor, the way he stepped up as a leader. He was included in Herdman's leadership group that he consults on the big decisions. You could see he was a more vocal presence on the training pitch and in games. So I certainly think he did himself no harm in these couple of games he had.
We understand, Ollie, why big-name players like Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, Kyle Larin, Tajon Buchanan, we can go down the list. Eustáquio Adekubi ended up leaving as well, the team. We know why they needed the rest. We know why some of them even had to report to new clubs. Do you think CONCACAF needs to do a better job at scheduling those two tournaments, so perhaps some of these bigger-name players, it wasn't just Canada, we know it was the U.S. as well, will compete in both? Because now you're kind of left with what could have been for Canada at the Gold Cup, right?
There's a couple of issues for me. One is that they're playing the Nations League and Gold Cup back to back. And I think the top players in that scenario are always going to pick the tournament that's shorter and that involves purely games against their biggest rivals in the region, right? You're not playing Guadeloupe and Cuba. You're playing against the best teams and you're getting a chance to win a trophy pretty quickly. The second issue for me, and this is a difficult one, because I think obviously, hosting tournaments, there's a financial aspect, trying to grow the game in the region and all those things. But I think playing the Gold Cup every 2 years probably is a factor in some of these players not necessarily wanting to show up to every tournament. I think when you compare the European Championship, for example, that's played every 4 years, and even if you're a top player who has a long career, you might realistically only get 3 chances to go to that tournament, right? And 3 chances is not a lot of opportunities to win it and to lift that trophy. And so you're not going to miss one. You're not going to say, well, this is going to come again for me pretty soon, so I'm just going to take this one off because I've had a long season. So that, I think, is part of it as well. Like I say, whether that's something they'll look at as to with the Nations League in play now, could the Gold Cup be every 4 years and be a bit more prestigious for that reason? I think there's probably a lot of different reasons that would have to be considered as to whether that's viable or not. But for me, that plays a part as well.